Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Brian Thatcher, and welcome to Mercy Unbound. It's a series that aims to provide hope, an avenue for healing, and one that will help you understand and then live the great mercy of God. With me today, I have a longtime friend of over 20 years. Roy Varghese is a author of 20 books on the interface of science, philosophy, and religion. One of his books, Cosmos, Bios, and Theos, included contributions from 24 Nobel Prize-winning scientists. In this book we're going to talk about today, Contact, 50 verified encounters with the Virgin Mary across 2,000 years and around the world. It's an incredible book. It's available at Amazon.com. And we're going to talk a little bit about 3 of the apparitions. Now, in these short interviews, we're not going to have time to get into great detail, so you're going to need to get the book. But he starts the book out with some quotes from different people. Mahatma Gandhi. This one I want to read from is where it starts, is Christ only to be adored, or is it the Holy Mother of God rather not to be honored? This is the woman who crushed the servant's head. Hear us, for your son denies you nothing. That was from Martin Luther in his last sermon at Wittenberg in 1546. Roy tied in the scientific analysis of how an event happens, and then scientists develop a hypothesis, and then they evaluate the evidence after. And we're going to get into 3 apparitions today. Many of you know the first one, Our Lady of Guadalupe, but there may be some of you out there that know only a little of it or never heard of it. And so I'm asked Roy to talk about Our Lady of Guadalupe from 1531. Roy, tell us about the events of 1531 with Juan Diego, and you talked again about the enduring evidence. Share with us your thoughts on that apparition.
Well, Brian, you touched on what is the archetypal, the most enduring apparition of all. I would go so far as to say that she is actually appearing to us even the basilica in Mexico City. I mean, the image in itself is probably the most extraordinary such image in the world. And I say all this for various reasons we'll get into. But the 3 features that are most outstanding about Guadalupe is, number 1, it's an account of a peasant of Aztec origin, very recently converted, who encounters a lady and who identifies herself as the Mother of God, of Jesus. And this, of course, is the paradigm of every major Marian apparition, where someone who's a peasant or a young child meets this lady who says she's the Queen of Heaven. And so that fits that paradigm, number 1. Number 2, we have the extraordinary phenomenon of the conversion of an entire nation within a matter of 7 years. And this is 8 million Aztecs that they considered Christianity as an alien religion. Their religion couldn't have been more different. And they considered the Spaniards as their enemies. So the phenomenon of that population leaving behind something with which for centuries their ancestors had held as their belief system, that in itself is a sociological a miracle or mystery beyond all telling. This happened in a matter of 7 years, in a fraction of a second, you could say. And what led to that change? It's you don't have anything like that in world history. So that's the second aspect of it. And the third is the existence of what is called a tilma. That's the cloak that the peasant was wearing and the image, as an account of the Guadalupe will tell you how that happened. But that image of this lady there who was an Aztec, this is why the Aztecs are related to her, and an Aztec queen. But the image is what is incredible, because it's not a painting. There's no brush strokes, and it's not made of any pigment known to humanity. There's not animal, vegetable, mineral. And it's not it's the fibers and that have the different colorations. It's not, there's no pigment, it's not painted. So, and the eyes of the lady, you see a reflection of the people who are there, which again, never before has that, before or after has that been found. That you don't find it in any painting for sure. How did that happen? Half a millennium ago, in the middle of nowhere. So the tilma, and even more extraordinary, it's the image is imprinted on this cloak made of cactus fibers. They last about 20 years max. Now it's nearly 500 years. So that is an extraordinary phenomenon. It's a whole bunch of extraordinary phenomena, which in this case, it makes this the paradigmatic Marian appearance, because what is characteristic of many of these, the kinds of apparitions I talk about, the verified, and as you touched on it, you find the three in science. You have a phenomenon, you have a theory to explain the phenomenon, then you have peers reviewing that theory, and then you have the evidence that's come and predictions that are made that validate the theory. So what do you have in a Marian apparition? You have an event, somebody claims to have seen something, and then there's the interpretation, that's the theory, that this person who was encountered is a messenger from heaven, namely the Virgin Mary. So that's the theory and explaining the phenomenon. And then you have the peer review process. What's that? The church, historians talk about the ecclesiastical officials who have analyzed these claims, have, this documentation has been considered very superior. The Guadalupe appearance is a case of the paradigm. It fits in with the standard paradigm of most of the major Marian appearances. Here we find a phenomenon, and I want to say that I compare these to scientific theories and discoveries. The model in science, there's three phases. You have a phenomenon, and a theory to try to explain it. The apple fell on Newton's head. Newton comes up with his theory of gravity. Then you have the peer review. You have other scientists looking at the evidence for the theory. And then you have predictions that the theory makes, which validate the theory. So in the case of, and other experiments that show it, in the case of a Marian apparition, you have the phenomenon itself, that someone claims to see the Blessed Virgin, a messenger from heaven, and then that's the theory explaining the phenomenon. The encounter, and the encounter is explained as a visit from heaven. And then you have the peer review. Who are the peer reviewers? It's church officials. They are actually the most skeptical of all. You would think church officials would be friendly, but if you look at the history of Marian apparitions, they almost always tend to be very hostile. And that's because this is an alternate source of authority, to alternate to the church. And so they are very skeptical on the whole. And historians have said that the documentation built by these church officials on the claim are very superior in quality. And so you have the peer review process through these hostile, these sources, the antagonists, who are actually ecclesiastical officials. And then thirdly, you have the enduring evidence, which is what I talked about. In this instant, it's about you see the ongoing conversions that happen, and something that's available for us to view today, such as the tilma, of which I talked about, which continues to puzzle anyone who analyzes it in any detail. There's no explanation. Nobody can replicate it with all the technology we have today. So in that sense, Guadalupe is an epitome of what the standard Marian apparition.
Roy, some people watching may say, well, the Catholic Church evaluated it. That doesn't mean anything. But there were a lot of scientists that are always studying this thing, and they've done a lot of sophisticated testing, infrared and all kinds of stuff I've read. And like you mentioned, the eyes, how do you explain that? What did he see in the eyes of the scientists see when they looked at Mary's eyes.
So yes, I mean, when I say that the church does the peer review process, I'm not saying it stays. I mean, nobody's going to believe the official just because they said, "Oh, this sounds good." There's also much other extraordinary events that are analyzed by third parties, and some cases they try to explain it away, but the church tells them, "Come along and analyze it every day." They invite people to come and if the visionary is in a trance, try to put a burning candle and see if the visionary reacts. In many cases, they have no reaction. So scientists have been very involved, especially in the last 100 years. And I want to your question I'd like to quote, read an excerpt from what a very famous philosopher of science, Stanley Yaki, said about Guadalupe and the image. And he quotes, and by the way, the fibers were analyzed by a Nobel Prize winner. So this is what Yaki says. It took a Nobel Prize winner chemist, Richard Kuhn, director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Heidelberg, to examine in 1936 two fibers, one red, the other blue, from the tilma, and reach the conclusion that neither of them contained any coloring. Later microscopic analysis of the tilma revealed that it showed no traces of brush strokes. Infrared investigation revealed no traces of pencil drawings. The eyes turned out to reflect the upper parts of the bodies of three men, in agreement with the Purkinje-Sanson effect discovered in the 1830s. Needless to say, no eyes in any painting show that effect. Its presence in the eyes of the lady, in the eyes of the lady's image on the tilma forms a stunning scientific proof that the lady was there in a mysterious though wholly real way, and that the bishop and two assistants were seen by her, quote unquote, physically. A conclusion imposes itself, therefore, on any unbiased mind, that in the image one is confronted with a miracle whose reality remains present as time goes on. There is no parallel to this in the annal of miracles. The image on the tilma has defied by its use and texture the laws of decay now for almost half a millennium. Now, this is by a very famous philosopher and historian of science. He got a Templeton Prize. He gave the Gifford Lectures. And this is the result of his analysis of it. So to your point, in the major appearances that we talk about in this book, the church has opened a door to the scientists, historians, whoever else wants to get in to do the analysis. They've been ready and willing to accept. And to my knowledge, I haven't seen anyone who has come up, and none of those who are skeptics have no explanation for why in every corner of the world do you have these claims. People have no connection through every century. In Vietnam, in Japan, in China, most countries in South America, Africa, all over Europe. How did this mysterious phenomenon of a messenger from heaven showing up, and all with the same consistent message all across the world, all through the last 2,000 years? It's simply, what's the overall theory to explain that phenomenon? That has not really been studied.
Roy, share with us some of these symbolisms seen in the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
That's yes. I mean, the tilma is an unending source of it's unendingly fascinating. The images, for instance, the stars that are on the tilma, on the cloak, and around, that's the state of the stars in the sky on that particular night, December 12th, 1531. And it's shown in the perspective of someone looking down from heaven. And then she wears her dress symbolizes she's a queen, and also symbolizes that she's pregnant, and her hair is loose, signifying she's a virgin. She has the sun behind her, signifying she's more powerful than the sun. She has the moon under her feet, signifying the crushing the moon gods. She has a cross where a cloak meets up, and symbolizing that her son has done the ultimate sacrifice, and she came to end the human sacrifice that was taking place at that time. And you see that her hands are folded in prayer, signifying she's not a goddess. She's praying to someone higher, to a quote unquote higher authority. So this is just the tip of the iceberg on the symbolism and the tilma.
You know, when I think of the world today and communism and the kind of the erosion of Christianity, the communists tried to destroy this tilma, didn't they, in the 100 years ago or so?
As it happens, this event happened exactly 100 years in 1921. And as it happened on my birthday, November 14th. But I wasn't alive 100 years ago. The day it took place. So I felt a special bond with this, with Our Lady of Guadalupe. I mean, yes, the explosion failed miserably. It caused a lot of other damage. It was heard like a mile away or half a mile away. It was huge. The cross was bent, all kinds of other damage, but the image, nothing happened. And it's a self-mending image. In the 18th century, someone actually spilled some acid on it, which burnt, and then this image fixed itself. So it's a super image of some kind. The bomb had no effect. I'm also talking about a communist. By coincidence, the founder of the Mexican Communist Party was an Indian, just like I'm an Indian, and his name happened to be Roy, which also happens to be my name. So I guess I have a special connection with Guadalupe.
Wow. Before we get into the next apparition, I want to go back. I failed to ask something that really hit me. In your book, you talk about in the Old Testament, how the queen was honored. And you talk about David, and to walk through that a little bit. And
so the understanding of the role of Mary, unfortunately, has been obscured, over the centuries, I guess, among Christians from different confessions, or as they call it, or denominations. And that's actually, if you look at the earliest church fathers, they saw her as the new Eve, just like as the original Eve said no to an angel, said no to the laws of God and was enticed by an angel to break these laws, which led to our fall, so to speak, of humankind. But also it was Adam who completed the fall. So there was Adam and Eve jointly opened a door to the fall. Well, this whole thing was reversed by another woman. And here she said yes to the laws of God, also responding to an angel, the angel Gabriel. And because of her saying yes, her son was born. Her son saved the human race. So every church father from the beginning saw her as the new Eve. And because she's the new Eve, everything about Mary is built around that fact that she's the new Eve. And even the epistles already talk about Jesus as the new Adam. So that's why we talk about all the different titles and so on of the Blessed Virgin. But another dimension that we don't know anything about these days is that the Jews, and in the Old Testament, you see the role of the Queen Mother is very significant. You see that when Solomon, when his mother comes into the court, he gets up and has a throne next to him, saying, "Come and sit here. Anything you ask, I will do." So the idea that the Queen Mother was the one to whom the king turned, and that's why when the Blessed Mother is seen as the Queen Mother, so the early Christians who were Jewish saw immediately her role. She was the Queen Mother. That's why you see Revelation 12. There she sees the Queen, and her son is the king. He rules all the nations with the rod. So her role as the Queen Mother was obvious to the first Christians. Apart from being the new Eve, she was the Queen Mother, Ark of the Covenant, all kinds of things. So I think that's.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but when David was king, his wife Bethsheba was the queen, and she would bow to him. And then when David died and Saul became king,
Solomon, yes.
Solomon, then Solomon would bow to Bathsheba, correct?
Correct. And there's an excellent book on this by Brant Pitre, who was a New Testament scholar, getting into the details on the role of the Jewish queen mother. But maybe there's a lot of literature on it.
Yeah, it's fascinating though that we as Christians don't know that, and that even makes more of this all make sense.
Well, the thing is, there's in the Time magazine talked about I think 10 of the major developments of the modern era. One of these was the discovery of the Jewish Jesus. Many of these studies of Testament were done by German New Testament scholars in the 19th century, and they thought of Jesus as a German from the 19th century. That's how they portrayed it and how they looked at it. That was the perspective. They forgot he's Jewish. And what has happened in the last 50 plus years is New Testament scholars have discovered he's Jewish. You've got to see everything from that standpoint.
Right.
That's how you understand it. The same thing is now being done with respect to the mother of Jesus. So once you understand she's Jewish, she's a Jewish mother, she's a Jewish queen mother of Jesus the King, then everything falls into place.
Right. I want to change gears now, and let's talk about Our Lady of Lourdes in 1858. Share with our audience who was Bernadette Soubirous and what was the nature of those apparitions and the theme and enduring evidence.
Yes, Lourdes is another extraordinary, one of the extraordinary Marian apparitions. So Bernadette she was from a very poor family. They lived in what was a town jail, and she went to get, brush twigs for a fire to the town dump, and that's where she saw the Blessed Virgin appeared to her. So, I mean, the humblest of circumstances. You see this pattern. She comes to the person who was a nobody, and so she, of course, her mother didn't believe her and told us forbid her from going there. But anyway, that's how it all started. And she saw this woman in a golden cloud coming out of this cave where she went, and then the woman asked her to drink from this fountain. There was no water there. She had to dig, and then the water came out, and now it's thousands of gallons every day coming out of there, and there are 5,000 cures attributed to it. The church has recognized 65 of these. So it's a phenomenon of, and what's that water? How is why is the water so special? Well, they analyze that. It's no different from water anywhere. There's no special medicinal properties, and yet it has had, it has been source of healing. 5 million pilgrims coming there every year, at least before the pandemic. But I want to read an excerpt from the British. So this is a Nobel Prize winner, Alexis Carrel, witnessed a lady with tuberculosis who was terminal, and he witnessed her being totally cured of her TB right in front of him. I mean, he didn't even think she'd make it up afterwards. He went with her on a train, and he wrote about this miracle. And then you have also the Oxford University publication. I like to just read just one very brief excerpt from what they say about the phenomenon. Lourdes from the beginning has been. They made a point of having scientific analysis of all the cures. That's why they've been very stringent in which ones they recognize. But here's what the Journal of the History of Medicine and Allied Sciences from Oxford said in 2014. The Lourdes phenomenon, extraordinary in many respects, still awaits scientific explanation. Lourdes concerns science as well as religion. the least that can be stated is that exposure to Lourdes and its representations, whether it's Lourdes water, mental images, replicas of the grotto, in a context of prayer, have induced exceptional, usually instantaneous, symptomatic, and at best physical cures of widely different diseases. Uncanny and weird, the cures are currently beyond our ken, but still impressive, incredibly effective, and awaiting a scientific explanation. This is, as I said, from the Journal of the History of Medicine and Allied Sciences from Oxford University. So, I mean, this the phenomenon of Lourdes is truly extraordinary. But again, you see the church is extremely guarded in accepting anything as supernatural. But here's a place where the claim is made: the Blessed Virgin appeared to a peasant girl and told her to dig here. Water came out of there. All that's, nobody contests that. And the Blessed Virgin said, this is a healing spring. They examined the water, nothing specific, nothing medicinal about the water. It's no different from any other water. And yet it produces claims of healing, which none but the most obtuse can reject. I mean, the claims take place, and some of them are, when the Lourdes Medical Bureau is made up of respected scientists and doctors who analyze all these claims.
Who did the Blessed Mother say she was?
And that was, the local priest asked Bernadette to find out who she was, and she asked, and she was reluctant. She appeared reluctant, but the young girl kept pressing her, and she said, finally, "I am the Immaculate Conception," which Bernadette was not known for a catechetical knowledge, quite the opposite, and she didn't understand. But that's pretty extraordinary, because this happened in just a few years after the dogma of the Immaculate Conception had been proclaimed. So that startled all the theologians around, that she would say that. But
what I remember with Bernadette too, she was so uneducated, the priest was reluctant. I think she had a delayed first communion because he wasn't sure she even understood her knowledge of the sacrament. So here she comes back and says, "I'm the Immaculate Conception." It's like that had to blown the officials away.
It did, actually. Yeah, it was quite remarkable. That was quite almost amusing. So
Roy, one last apparition we're going to talk about in this interview today is one from Champion, Wisconsin.
Yeah, before that, I wanted to add one more thing about how did Lourdes become well known. This was taking place in a backwater in France. You would never have heard of it, if not for the fact that a Jewish writer was being hunted by the Gestapo. He had to flee Austria, came to France, and the Germans took over France. And then they were on the hunt for him. He managed to get to Lourdes, and that's where he heard about the story of Lourdes, which is not known about at all in most other places. And then he made a vow: if he gets out of there and he gets to the US, he's going to write about it. And he did. And he wrote a book called A Song of Bernadette, which was a New York Times bestseller for one whole year. And they did a movie about it, or based on that, which won 4 Oscars. Can you imagine that? 1948. That's how Lourdes became known. I mean, God works in the strangest ways.
We have that video at our home. And if I remember correctly, when Werfel died, he was Jewish, but he lived in California, and the Archbishop of LA gave him a Christian burial.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So amazing.
He said himself in the book that I was led by divine providence to come here. He felt that he was part of a divine plan.
Amazing.
Yeah, indeed.
But let's move on to the last one, Our Lady of Good Help in Wisconsin. Didn't the bishop write the introduction to your book, actually?
Yes, Bishop Ricken, the Bishop of Green Bay, in which the site of the apparition falls within his diocese, is kindly wrote a foreword to my book. And as you know, that site is the only it's the site of the only approved apparition of the Blessed Virgin in the United States. So it is something for which we're all grateful, and it's also the message, and the events there are pretty striking themselves as well. But it's clear when she appeared to a humble Belgian immigrant and told her, please catechize the children of the area, teach them the catechism, bring them, make a general confession, and offer sacrifices in penance for sins, and then instruct the children in the catechism, teach about the sacraments, the sign of the cross, etc. So that's how there was always this kind of thing. Like in Guadalupe, and in Lourdes, the Blessed Virgin asked the missionaries involved build a church, which is so people come there and worship God. And the same thing, in Champion, she asked Adele to catechize the children, to bring them to faith. And she built a chapel there. There's now a church. And of course, as you know, that was the site of a major miracle in itself.
You know what hit me with that one was how the Blessed Mother said she was happy that she was going to just teach the children the sign of the cross.
Yes.
Yes. I thought to myself, think of all the people in the church throughout our country alone who are involved in just teaching the youth in
yes.
their catechisms. And we kind of blow it off and take it for granted, this and that. And the Blessed Mother's looking down on them saying she's so happy. It's really an affirmation for just, we got to teach the faith.
Oh, yeah, it most definitely is. And it's also, yeah, you're right about some things which you never expect. That's another thing about these apparitions. All of them, there's something you'd never expect happening, all different in their own way. Like in one of the Belgians apparitions, actually, they were saying, the children were saying, how can I get others to get them to believe in you, that you're here? And the Blessed Mother's response was, well, I believe in you. So she didn't try to directly address it. And so that, so these, and she doesn't get easily sidetracked. In Lourdes, the parish priest had told Bernadette to ask the Blessed Virgin to make the rose bush bloom out of the blue to show that she's there, which she refused to do. But in Guadalupe, as you know, she had a hillside full of roses in the middle of winter. But she, follows her own plan for what's to take place there.
Well, Roy, those are just 3 of the apparitions of 50 in your book, Contact, 50 verified encounters with the Virgin Mary across 2,000 years and around the world. And you can get it at Amazon.com. We're going to continue to do shows with Roy. In the next show, we're going to talk about Catherine Labouré, Zaytun, Egypt, and Our Lady of Cuapa, Nicaragua. So stay tuned for next week's show. But I'm telling you, this is an incredible book, and the Blessed Mother is involved in bringing people all over the world to her son, and Roy did an incredible job of putting this together. So Roy, thank you again for joining me today on Mercy Unbound. People, get the book, spread the truth will set you free, and God bless.
Thank you, Brian, and God bless all that you're doing. Appreciate you taking the time.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video portion. The podcast can be heard at anchor.fm/Dr. Brian, Bryan Thatcher, Thatcher, and on all the major podcast forums. I would love to speak at your church or conference, and please consider supporting our efforts to spread the truth to a hurting world. Thank you again. And for more information, go to the website at drbrianthatcher.com.